Hi everybody, welcome to Talking Automotive with Mark and John. I'm John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palabestra.
Hi John, I'm very excited about today's episode. We've got Agostino Giramondo from Carsales. Ag has an extensive background in media with newsprint, local and also national and metro. And he's also from Carsales, so he's got some fantastic insights on what Carsales are seeing in the industry and some really good strong green shoots.
Yeah, definitely, Mark. I think there is some really interesting stuff came out of that. So especially looking at the leads up, things are starting to show some improvement in the market. Whether that will follow through or how quickly that will follow through still needs to be seen. But it's definitely some exciting times and showing some definite improvement in the market. So I think I really enjoyed the conversation and looking forward to jump into it with the listeners.
Absolutely. For me, the key ones are Ag's talking about leads up over 20%. We've got 55% up year on year with the premium brands. We're seeing no significant price drops as far as no one's significantly discounting. So prices are holding up very well. And customers are really looking at reviews. So a lot of good, strong activity in reviews and research.
Yeah, and it's a good guidance for dealers to really have a look at and try and manage through this with limited staff and how they can react to some of those green shoots as they come into the market. So, well, let's jump into it and let's have a chat to Ag.
Your background is a very extensive one in media. So you've started out, and it's interesting that there's a lot of discussions around local media right now and the contraction of what's happening. So correct me if I'm wrong. News Corp, you've moved then across into the digital space.
Yeah, so from News Corp, there was I went to a small independent newspaper group after News, and then back to News. So News Corp in 2 stints, and then digital. Sorry, but don't forget the part from local to metro newspapers. So the Herald Sun and the Daily Telegraph in Sydney.
So you've seen the local paper engaging with the community, and then moving to what was a very new business, being Carsales. And we're keen to get some background around how did Carsales come into existence? What's the backstory? Who started it? And where's the business today?
So I'm happy to talk about the when Carsales started, and in fact, my insight into Carsales when I was at News, because I did a major project on Carsales when I was at News as well.
Right. So how did Carsales come into existence with your project that you did on Carsales, and what attracted you to go there?
So Carsales came into existence in 1997. Its founder is Greg Roebuck, legendary now and very good friend and Walter Schotter. And they were at Reynolds, which is what is now known as Pentana. And as I understand it, the first iteration of Carsales was really a dealer-to-dealer service where inventory could be made visible on this thing called the internet, and dealers would be able to buy cars off each other. Well, that didn't last that long. It became a full-on consumer proposition, and Greg always tells the story that he was looking for a car for his wife Karen, and he just found it to be such a challenge, and so there's got to be a better way. So, as it turns out with most of these stories, they're driven by someone's need and what they've seen as being a problem, and they go ahead and use their smarts to try and solve that problem. It wasn't always a success. When I was at News, we looked at Carsales as this little business that was interesting, but it was nothing really that was going to worry us. And that's when I first met Greg, actually. I met Greg attending many different functions, AADA conventions, etc. But there was also a little side relationship we had as both being Richmond supporters. I was the MC at Richmond Football Club functions, and Greg would be a member in attendance. So we got to know each other there, and we had a pretty good relationship as friends. But I became really interested in Carsales in 2009, and that was when they publicly listed. And I was at News, and I was on a leadership development program. And our topic was saving print classifieds, and then it was narrowed down to automotive. So we suddenly had a view of Carsales. Everyone thought that Carsales was a decent business by then, but no one had really seen its revenues and what it was doing. Obviously, when you publicly list, that's all disclosed. So it became really apparent that this was a very big business. And what was even more interesting was where the revenue came from, the revenue pie chart. So it wasn't just advertising, it was data and services and the subscriptions. And as you take a deeper dive, you realise how entwined it had become in the automotive industry and all those wonderful products that came out of it, like Live Market, etc., which we can talk about in this conversation. But so it went from strength to strength. And in 2017, Greg retired, and now we have Cameron McIntyre, who is a former CFO and COO of our business, as a CEO. And it's always a big challenge when you take over from someone who founded a business and who's got a big name as an entrepreneur. And Cam's had pretty big shoes to fill. But I've worked with many great leaders, and I'm not just saying this because I work for the business, but Cam's the right guy to lead the business. And our culture hasn't changed. That's the most important thing. The culture at carsales is one of the things that really was attractive to me when I was making the decision to join the business, which is now almost 7 years ago.
Where's the business today compared to some of the other competitors in the market?
So we're the market leader. We tend not to use numbers as a comparison point because anyone can fiddle numbers, but we've got the biggest audience. We're in front by a fair bit on that. Our objective is to empower consumers, whether they're customers, whether they're dealers, etc. And we make buying and selling the car pretty easy and convenient for everyone. So, we're number one in all the key metrics. So traffic, number of listings. Interestingly, now even in the private space, during COVID-19, our private listings have held up better than some of our competitors, where there has been some impact in recent years. But we're fairly well ahead in all areas. But I don't want that to appear arrogant either, because we don't just compare ourselves to the other verticals. There's Google and Facebook. There's TV, which is now digital. There are newspapers that are digital. So we are competing for the advertising dollar against all of those platforms. It's not just the other verticals that are in the same space.
And as far as being a business partner, so there's been a lot of conjecture around carsales. Like from a consumer perspective, fantastic, but there's often been some checkered debate around carsales as a business partner. I suppose it's the elephant in the room. We're keen to address it straight away. What are your thoughts on that, and why is carsales a good business partner?
So it is an elephant in a big room, but the view of carsales, I think, having been on the other side, so I was on the board of Cars Guide for a few years when News Corp and Cars Guide and One Way Traffic, the consortium of dealers, had a joint venture. And what was apparent was that it was really easy to put holes into a business like carsales because it was the market leader and it was too big, and all the usual stories you hear with this. You hear this with Seek, you hear it with realestate.com. And when businesses grow really quickly, I guess some of that criticism is justified because you grow so quickly and you're almost forcing people to use you. But the truth is now, if that was the case then, it certainly isn't the case now. And if it was the case then, it wasn't deliberate. What happens when you grow is that you start challenging people. You start challenging decision makers who have been used to advertising in certain mediums or using a certain product, and you start challenging them because consumers are coming in saying, this is what I'm looking at. So we've developed what I think is very, very proudly an enormous suite of tools, and that's using our data and the strength we've got in numbers to provide insight to the market. So products like Redbook IQ that we've developed lately, it's a Tableau visualization dashboard, but it brings in data from all the different points that we gather data from and gives a real-time analysis on not only leads and how quickly dealers are responding to them, but if you're an advertising agency or in the marketing department of an OEM or even a dealer, you can see how your campaigns are going. Is it driving more traffic? What are the cross views? Are you trying to win consideration and share over another product? We also give insight that isn't that well received sometimes, because you might be talking to a product manager and you show them the data that, one car is being cross-shopped against another, and it's not the one that they thought was the competitor set. It may either be lower than what they thought, and their car is better than that. So some of them are rude awakenings, but relationships are a really important thing in this business, in any business. But if we can build really strong relationships and show that we actually care about the industry, care about customers, being a vertical can help you do that. And by that I mean that a horizontal is what we call a website that has many different divisions. So it could have property, it could have employment, could have automotive, gifts, etc. But because we concentrate on automotive, well, then we have to invest in that. And so the investment in that pays off because we share that with our customers. Sure, everybody likes to pay less, and people wish they didn't have to pay for certain things, but that's normal, right? So if you can cross that bridge and you can get over that, then the products that we've got are really useful. And the other one's a live market. I mean, if you're still ringing a wholesaler now to get a price on a car, or a range of wholesalers, then you're really not seeing the big picture. A live market captures the data from all the cars that are listed, the delisted price, so you can work out not only what to price a car at, but what to buy. So if you're a used car manager and you really need a kick, why are you just buying a certain amount of cars because that's what you've always bought? If live market says to you, Corolla's going well at the moment, and you can pick up Corollas that you can move, sure, if you're a prestige dealer, that might not work, but in most cases you'll find a fit. And live market continually gets developed. Again, it's one of those products that we always think can work better, but it's certainly an idea that came out of what do you do with your data and how do you help the industry. There's other things that we really like to do more of, and that's the deep dive sessions we have with OEMs and agencies, and those deep dives give some really big insight into what's happening with a particular brand. Again, you see that from consumers, so it's great to see what dealers are doing once you deliver an inquiry and the behaviour of dealers, but it's even better to understand how a consumer's seeing it. And consumers, of course, will behave in different ways. They'll react to a certain offer, but they'll also react to what competitors are doing, and they'll react to the environment. Right now with COVID-19, it is all reaction to an environment, and they're really looking for specific things, and we're seeing that in our data. So what's the point of us keeping that data to ourselves and not sharing it with our customers? There's lots of things, right down to business consultancy. So we have a dedicated resources that will actually spend time with dealers and deep dive into their business to try and increase profitability, etc.
So the dealers that have the impression, because there's the perception is that car sales wants to compete against the dealers. Does that make sense? That thought pattern? Well,
it depends on who you talk to, because if somebody is convinced that something is what it is, then it's hard to talk them out of it. But the truth is that we have a changing consumer, and we're all consumers. I often do this in presentations where I'll ask the audience, and hopefully I've done my research, but being a cyclist, I'll ask how many cyclists are in the audience, and a show of hands goes up, and I'll ask them when they bought their last bike, and they'll say it was recently. And then where did you get it from? How did you research? And suddenly the penny drops that, well, when I put my consumer shoes on, I'm doing all the things that I'm wishing they didn't do when they were buying the car. I'm comparing the market. I'm checking price. I'm reading reviews. I'm going to an impartial, unbiased third party to check all this out. So I'm going to Bike Exchange. If I'm looking for a house, I might go to a real estate agent's website, but I'll always go to realestate.com.au. And just to check out, I might go to Domain because, there might be something I've missed out on. So anybody can live without something, right? But at what cost, and why would you? And I always say to dealers and OEMs, use the lever. There's a lever that's been created which helps bring you closer to a buyer. And we spend lots and lots of time and money on making our website more attractive, more consumer friendly. So that, the idea that we're an enemy or we're interfering with the dealer business just doesn't cut it in the modern day. I mean, the days of sponsoring your local bowls club and your footy club, etc., they're still there, but the return in business is not guaranteed, is it? Because you can find a car anywhere, just like you can find golf clubs anywhere. We've, in the last 2 months, I can't believe how many items we've had delivered to our place because, you can't go out. So you start looking. It's so easy. We didn't invent the internet. We just invented a really good product that works on the internet.
Would it be fair to summarise it then, Ag, that the whole link with the dealer network is that you're a service to help them? You've got no plans to actually replace them. You provide information and a platform to sell and procure vehicles with your live market check and gauge what the used car is worth. You've got people who are in market researching, so you provide research information, and you provide tools on how to stand out in that research with the various badges that you've now got. I think you guys have done some fantastic innovations through this COVID process, the test drive at home and all those other initiatives that you put through. Plus you've got powerful information. So I must admit, I've heard all the stories, and I just don't understand why there are some that still persist saying, but car sales is against the industry, because I think you guys had a very, very good service to this industry.
Well, I think in the last 2 months, there's probably been a recognition that we've proven that we care. The waiving of the fees for dealers in April, the continuation of some sort of discount in May and again in June shows the support that we've given the industry. And back to one of my earlier points, that it is our industry. Our investment is in improving the outcome for consumers, improving the outcome for dealers. Our product suite will continue to grow based on the needs of the dealers. And I have this view, and it's not shared by some of the ones that might have the opinion that you just gave, Mark, but we're not a disruptor. A disruptor is someone that says, I've got cars, buy them off me, don't buy them the traditional way. We're just doing what, formerly I was at newspapers and we had, I remember Cars Guide, we had a 64-page edition of Cars Guide one week. It was huge. And all we'd hear from customers was, this thing called the internet's going to kill you, it's going to keep you honest. So it really depends on who's on top at any given time about who you may and may not like. But the difference is of course, you wouldn't know how well that ad worked. And now we've got a much better idea of not only how it's working, but what you can change in real time. You don't just set and forget an ad, and wait next week for it to come back out and hopefully get it right. So the view is incorrect. I understand it. I understand it completely. And sentiment is very important. And we spend a lot of time on improving that sentiment. And even in the almost 7 years I've been at Car Sales, that has changed. That has changed quite a bit. And interestingly too, your audience may or may not agree with this, but in a herd mentality, people have an opinion, but one-on-one, it's often quite different.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of your other tools and that you have available? So something like AutoGate. Can you explain how that works, just to give our listeners a bit of background to it?
Yeah, so AutoGate, what a wonderful product. I mean, without AutoGate, we probably wouldn't have Car Sales. So it's a lead and inventory management system. It's a piece of software that talks to all the DMSs and inventory comes into AutoGate for publication onto Car Sales. So originally it was the gateway to Car Sales. It has since become more than that. It's now an inventory distribution system. So actually there's stock in AutoGate that doesn't make it onto Car Sales, but is distributed to other sites, dealer websites, and we even have a distribution agreement with some of our competitors, because the idea of AutoGate is it is a place where dealers can manage inventory. The prospect management side is really important, because that's where you manage the sales stage, etc., of a prospect, and you're able to allocate it to your salespeople. It has auto responses in there. I would say it's probably a 70% CRM. It doesn't have CRM capability of what to do with customer data post that inquiry or post the sale, but it's all about managing that prospect. And we also have some pretty strict privacy rules to abide by. So, you send an inquiry on a car, it's meant to be replied to for that car. But it becomes this wonderful repository for an understanding of how many leads you've got. A product like AutoGate Pro, which is an extension of AutoGate, which is now offered as part of the new car package, but an additional one for used, allows you to bring in leads from all other sources as well. It's a very big appeal to dealers because often there's a disconnect, and with the greatest of respect, Mark, you'd know this, the disconnect between the OEM and the dealer is an OEM may want to implement a new lead management system, and the dealer spends 90% of their time on this thing called AutoGate. So the minute you try and put in a new system that doesn't talk to where the majority of leads are coming from, it can become quite a challenge from an uptake point of view. So we try and integrate all of that, and we try and encourage a greater use of AutoGate. Obviously, some dealers, some of the bigger groups, etc., would still prefer their leads to go into other systems, and we're fine with that too. We have a two-way interaction now. So if you want to manage it in a DMS, you can. You want to manage it in another lead management system, you can too. We do more and more now get brochure requests and test drive requests from OEM websites that also go into AutoGate. Again, the appeal with that is that if I'm dealer X, I'm receiving leads in the one platform, I know how to respond to it, and I don't have to go from one system to another. There's one thing we know is how time poor dealers are, and trying to manage 4 or 5 different profit centers, and it's just madness. So the last thing you want is someone saying to you, by the way, we're going to send you this via email or via another system. I forgot to tell you it's going to cost you this much to implement it. Oh, but we haven't worked out how to get leads from one source into another yet. So we look at that every day. It's a really big challenge, and we think AutoGate is a way of solving all of that by making it kind of the centre of activity and then spreading out from there.
Now, Ag, you guys at carsales, I think, have done something fantastic through this COVID thing. And you were doing it before, but the carsales insights that you're publishing, I watch those religiously. There is such powerful information on what's happening at the upper funnel, and then all the other actions and trends that we're seeing through what is now the new normal. You can't go by what used to be standard process literally 3 months ago versus now. And I think it's very interesting just seeing those insights and what the key learnings are from that. So I'm just keen to get some, if you could summarize some of the key things you've picked up with those insights that you've been presenting.
So again, we've always shared insights, but at certain times insights become critical. And we were really proactive on this one early. So much so that we've probably had webinar fatigue, so we're now cutting them down to once a month. But we found because things were moving so quickly, and all you've got to do is look at how many times a day there'd be a government announcement or some sort of announcement, we had to follow suit. And we also had to do it for ourselves too, because we suddenly became disconnected internally by moving off-site and having to move a whole business, a technology business, out of an office. Now, it was an incredible exercise, but what we learned out of it was that if we stay connected and share what we're seeing with each other, then that's going to work. So taking that into industry made a lot of sense. And we've been running lots of customer surveys, etc. So you mentioned badges before. The badges was a really quick turnaround. And technology business, things don't turn around as quickly as you might think. There's roadmaps and something's got to get bumped out of the way. But we saw the need for that really quickly. And dealers have really embraced it, particularly buy from home. And just badges enable dealers to show to a consumer that they have all these services, and that, because they were deemed an essential service early on, which was great, they were able to stay open. So how do you then make sure that the consumer doesn't feel nervous, negative, etc.? So that's worked. The insights, we've had different focuses. So some of the webinars have been dealer specific. Some have been specific just to OEMs. I believe it's specific to everybody, because if you're at an OEM right now, your number one concern is your dealer network, and it should be. And so we found that the audience is quite mixed. I've run a couple of separate ones as well, and we've had some, we had one with Sol Eastlake, and I didn't run that one, but we've had quite a few. So really good guests. I had a negotiator from Harvard, Bob Bordone. We had a really interesting conversation about negotiation, etc. So it's gone beyond insight and into assistance as well. But we're seeing changes. So every week we've had a consumer survey, and we've seen how that sentiment has changed. And obviously, when COVID first hit, and all we were worried about was just bunkering down, well, then sentiment took a hit. Of course it did. But what we've seen since is a rise every week, every month. And in May, we've had some incredible results. We're seeing a real shift to lead volumes being dominated by prestige brands. We're seeing obviously a change in what's happening with lead volumes. So we're much closer now to year-on-year volumes, which is remarkable. And I'll just talk about new and near new here. Our view volume for the industry up 19%. Lead volume up 90%. When we say for the industry, we're talking about all brands together. So it's not the place to start talking about any brand specifically here. So the lead volume is 30%, not 19. Sorry. So view volume 19%, lead volume 30. The mainstream brands, so volume brands, those figures are 15 for views and 22 for leads. So all the metrics are up. Why is this? It could be because the consumer is looking for a deal. We haven't seen any significant price drops from dealers, and we've seen some aggressive offers from OEMs, but not over the top. Couple of reasons, perhaps. I'm not an economist, but obviously with JobKeeper, etc., means that we still have a fairly buoyant outlook. That could change, and we hope that government is looking at that and making sure that things don't fall off the cliff. But clearly, with cars not coming into the country, the stock that's remained has had to be aggressively pushed. So what might be happening at dealer level and below the line invoicing, etc., we've got no idea. But we're certainly seeing great activity, which is a good sign. But we were very transparent about this because in the early days when it wasn't high, we were telling people, we were telling our customers, it's not great. It doesn't look good. So if you do that, I think you win respect and trust, which goes back to that sentiment. If you're transparent and show it as it is, then you start getting some questions that arise from these insight sessions. So we've had a lot of deep dives since with individual businesses as a result of what we've shared. Just on the final one about the prestige brands, 27% up in view volume and 55% up in lead volume. So this is May. So we can only expect June to be as good. So when we say up, we're not up from previous month, which was low, or March, year on year. And usually May is a pretty good month, right? Where we've got over the post end of Japanese financial year lull and Easter in April, and we start seeing some aggressive activity towards the end of May and into June. So, we think they're really good signs, to be honest. And with the insight sessions that we're having with OEMs, we're able to share even more intricate data by model. The cross-shopping, you go back to this tool, Redbook IQ, one of the things we did during this period was, offer it to all our clients. So obviously some are going to embrace it more than others. And that's got nothing to do with whether you're interested. It's the tech savviness of wanting to go on and actually see something and cut up the data. But if you do that and you're that way inclined, you get some really good insights, some real pearls of wisdom to see which models are doing better than others and why. And consumers read. So I look at the editorial. Our editorial traffic is at an all-time high. They're looking for information. And interestingly, again, when we talk about editorial, people might think, yes, your editorial views might be high because people are reading bad news, but that isn't actually the case. They're actually reading reviews and comparisons, and the emergence of video comparisons has been very important here, where consumers are spending time looking at videos, and then that information of what they're doing, what actions they're taking post watching the videos, post-reading stories, going on to submit an inquiry is really valuable information to an OEM.
What's happening? Is there any particular models? Is it SUV? Is it sports? And where's the medium pickup and cab chassis market right now?
So the most popular category is still the dual cab ute, right? And the only passenger car that features in the top 7 is small passenger. They're pretty aggressive at the bottom end there in small passenger. Interestingly, small SUV is kind of 7th, and so you've got dual cab, and then you've got medium and large SUV as being the big ones. So, like commercial, with the instant asset write-off is obviously going to be a big lure. But yeah, Australians still love their SUVs and utes. We absolutely know that, and we see that.
And has there been an increase in light car? Because this is a question that some of the other data was indicating, that people who don't have cars right now, who were using rideshare, are now saying they want to look for a car. Now, not necessarily new, but a light car or a small hatch. I'm thinking the people that live in Paddington or in Richmond, a suburb very dear to your heart, no car parking, they suddenly have to get a car. Are they? What are they searching for?
No, they're searching for. You got to remember that if you don't have a car, you're not going to start searching for a car that's 60,000 plus. So clearly, they're searching in the 10 to 20,000 bracket. But again, when you cross shop, you are enticed to look at what else, because finance offers, etc., come into play. I think it's a really interesting question around what that consumer does, because you're right, the research, not only our research, but research from everywhere, is showing that the consumer is going to be a little bit nervous with public transport. So provided they have a job, and we have an interesting situation when JobKeeper ends around what the unemployment level will be like, but provided we manage to contain the economy and it starts growing again, and Australia's always in a good position for that, then you would expect the second car to be the cheaper one, the more affordable one. And that's why that small passenger segment is doing quite well. In the used segment, that's also doing quite well. We have seen a drop off, like I said before, we're actually ahead of our competitors in private, but obviously private sales in general have gone down, and that will start to increase again. Subscription could become a really interesting option for the consumers, because again, is it a bridge too far? I don't have a car and I'm going to buy a car. Does the idea of subscribing to a car as a service, if I'm only going into the office once or twice a week, appeal? Or should I just get a car because it's a great deal and it doesn't mean I need to use it every day? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, most people who own a car understand that car is actually in a garage more times than it's on the road. But this is where the top end, the prestige figures are interesting. Clearly, people are saying, I'm looking for a car because I think I can get it for a price that I may not have been able to get it before. So the same applies to cars at the other end. We'll go, well, if I'm going to get one, I know it's not going to hurt that much, but it's going to solve all these other problems that I've got. Does the future of work influence all of this? There's the fact that there's going to be a lack of international travel for a while, or some sort of restriction, so I'm going to be able to drive to holidays more, etc. I read something interesting the other day that investment properties might be an issue, but those that have got investment properties that are Airbnbs are probably better off, because people will be flocking back into certain regional areas because they just need to get away. So I think the research is quite interesting. Clearly, if you asked anybody at the height of this, if you wanted to go on public transport, they'd say no. But now they'd say, well, actually going on public transport is not so much a problem with infection, but if I'm going to be having to make a booking just about to go on public transport, and I can have the luxury of my own car and my hours are going to be flexible, then suddenly I like a car again, because I'm not hit with traffic and all that sort of thing. They're the reasons why people wouldn't buy cars. And that tends to go away in this in what our future may look like. So I think it's quite interesting, and the car manufacturers and dealers should be quite excited about the prospect of selling cars to people who had stopped buying them.
Where do you think the sweet spot is for people buying cars at the moment, eh? Because we mentioned sort of the entry level. We mentioned a bit about the used cars, guys coming out of who don't own a car at the moment, and then you're talking the top end premium. Is there any particular sweet spot that you think people are aiming at?
The people, as in the consumer, or
in terms of the consumers.
I think we're starting to see that emerge. That, as I just said, that there's clearly going to be an appetite. There's a growing appetite for, if I'm looking at a car, what are my options in that smaller car area? I think it'll also be about what I can maximise before June 30. So the instant asset write-off isn't just about like commercials, even though that's where it's being pitched at. If you're an ABN holder, you can take advantage of it. Because Australians love utes, if I can get a Triton or a Ranger or a Hilux or anything like that at a good price, I'm going to look at it. So I think the sweet spot is still developing. We're seeing, we've gone from activity at a real low, and people not really looking for much, and the ones that were looking were the ones who still had a capacity to buy. And then as the situation seems to have soothed a little bit, we're starting to get levels in all areas coming back to normal. But the small passenger car one, which I think is one that has been quite active for some time, because passenger cars have all but disappeared in Australia. It's the small passenger car that still has the power to move the dial for some manufacturers. And so I think that's certainly going to be a sweet spot. But there's a lot of facelifted SUVs coming into the market. We still like buying cars. Credit's still cheap. I think it really depends on how things look, post the end of the support. But there is the other thing, that people are buying cars at the moment because they had money saved up for a holiday. Now, this is all anecdotal, but we're hearing this from a few dealers. The money that was saved for a holiday is now being used to buy a car, which is really interesting, because when you think about it, they're both depreciating assets, right? Like, you're not going to get the holiday back after you've done it. And we know that a car loses some value. But if you can get a car with a great deal and added value, and the warranties are very good, and the offers are getting more and more aggressive from a value point of view, I really think that the industry's done a good job of not making everything look cheap and on sale, and it's the value that's really luring the consumer. Then, you can see why people have still got that appetite to invest in something that's going to help their lifestyle. And I do tie it back into the fact that you will be driving more, not less, because you'll actually have places to go to, etc. I think we tend to just define it as driving is to work and back. And you look at Mark's background, you don't drive that to work, you drive that for fun, right?
It's always a pleasure with the top down in the Maro, for sure. But Ag, it's an interesting point you raise, because you're talking about SUVs are still the main game, as are medium pickups, their lifestyle. And it's a very good point you raise, that there's been a lot of talk about the workplace and how this is going to change the workplace. If the vehicle's not being used for work, it's the recreational vehicle. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to do the overseas travel. It actually trends to be more attractive to buy a car because you want to get around Australia. Now, if you're reluctant to fly and you'd rather go up to Bright and Myrtleford and go four-wheel driving through the Ovens Valley there, or do some lovely camping down the Great Ocean Road, or head west or east to Mallacoota, or go to the Hunter Valley and all these sorts of things, that really would, the data you're showing really supports that that's where people's heads are at right now. The overseas holidays are being parked for alternatives. And it's interesting, John, just some feedback I got from a couple of grey nomads this week. There is apparently a whole horde of them amassing, ready to cross the Queensland border when it's available, because they want to head north and they're restricted right now. They're held in New South Wales and northern New South Wales, so they can push through. So are we going to see a trend for more of this activity, which means that there's every chance we're going to run out of stock in this short burst because production doesn't ramp up fast enough often?
Yeah, because I think, Mark, that's a very good point, and maybe Ag can fill us in on that, because Ag, part of what Mark and I have been debating is this: if things come back quite quickly, a lot of the factories have closed down in Europe or Asia, and it's going to take them a while for them to pick up production. And their first instance will be to fill their home markets before they start shipping in long supply chains to Australia. We might actually find a shortage of vehicles in the short term. So that's quite interesting for us. And what would that impact be on dealers? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I do have access and subscriptions to a lot of sites and reports that show what's happening in manufacturing. It's certainly going to be more volatile, right? So, in the US, there was a COVID-19 positive case in a Ford factory, and they sent everybody home, and it closes down for 5 days. I mean, that obviously affects production. It doesn't affect Australia in that case, but clearly we know our big markets, Japan, Thailand, Germany. Some of the cars come from Czechoslovakia, etc. That if there's an issue in those markets and we're a right-hand drive market, where do we sit in priority? I get your point. You're right. It appears that most OEMs had a pretty good level of stock, which shows probably some sort of oversupply for some, and obviously they're putting that into the market now, and that's where some of the great benefits are coming for the consumer. I think you'll find in some areas, like the Japanese will be very keen to get cars down here as quickly as they have in the past. One little disruption will obviously put things back. Is that a bad thing though? When you think about it, if you're a dealer and you've got the opportunity to be able to pre-order someone and give them then the option to get into a near new or a low kilometre used car, which could be at a better margin for you, and the car still has the balance of a new car warranty, etc. It's probably not a bad thing. You've got all these cars coming back from rental and ex-fleet, etc. I mean, that does sustain it for quite some time. And before we actually get to, running out, I always look at a new car as any car that's done less than, say, 5,000 Ks, is less than 2 years old. Because of the way cars age so quickly and become used and move from a dealer to another and go into auctions, etc., they're still new, right? And the recommendations to consumers for many years now have been buy demos, buy low kilometre used cars. So I think that we definitely will have an impact with production, but we may have needed that. This could be exactly what we need, because Australia has been, in years gone by, not a dumping ground, but it's the one where if you're the CEO from an OEM and you're on a conference call and somebody from head office says you're taking this many cars, you don't have the courage to say no. You get off the phone, you go, what have I just committed to? And you go to your marketing department and you tell the marketing department that we now have to move more stock than we thought we had, and that changes plans. And so I think that was a vicious cycle that might actually be of benefit now. We have 771, I think, consumers per 1,000 people that have got a car. So that was starting to slow down. But now we're starting to see people who, to your point before, Mark, and what the research is showing is that there is an appetite to look at a car again. But what they're looking at, aside from that high-end growth, which I think is probably short-term, because they're people that are still surviving and still doing well and looking for a great opportunity, but there's going to be a whole group of people who will be spending more time on a very flexible lifestyle, and car becomes a solace. So I'll be looking for a car. I'd be very attractive if I was that type of consumer, very attracted to a car that is near new as much as I would for a brand new car.
Now, Ag, question I'm keen to ask as far as, what are your recommendations for good decision making, utilising all the tools that you have at carsales? what's your advice for OEMs and dealers right now to get the most out of their car sales subscription?
So I don't want it to sound like an advertisement, but our AutoGate subscription is pretty much like an iPhone, right? Where you're on a plan, but you might use 10% of its capacity. So certainly it's a good time in downtime to look at the products you've got, and everybody should have live market. It sounds like a sales pitch, but you really should. The number of OEMs that have live market so they can see what their dealer network is doing or how they can help them is, indicative of how important it is. So that's a must-have in my opinion. And then you've got the opportunity now to tap in to all the insight that we've got and request meetings. We've got performance managers that are itching to get back out in the field. They, like all of us, have got used to this sort of setup where we're doing it on Zoom. And actually, when you can present a screen, share a screen and show some data, that is that's quite sticky with the client. Whereas in the past, you may have had limited time with a DP or a general manager and perhaps not got what you wanted out of it. So I think it's a good time to just take a deep breath. I'm into taking a deep breath and just, it's like when you're having a shot for goal, right? Just breathe and think about it going through. Don't panic. And so now that there is some downtime, look at the products that you've got. Go back to some of the webinars that we've been running and pick up some pearls there that you might want to expand on. And if you've been on them and you've written down notes, what are you going to do about it? I mean, it's not just us. There's lots of insight out there, but what we're showing is what the consumer's doing, which is really important. So, right now, the dealers that respond the quickest, right now, the dealers that are there for the consumer, in other words, 9 to 5, not only was it yesterday before this, but it certainly is now. I mean, we're just working all different hours because we're in front of these screens. And, once kids go back to school, we're going to be running around a lot more, and very tolerant employers because they understand the situation is different. So how are you going to set your business up to make sure that you're ready for that consumer? Think about the new consumer that wasn't buying a car until recently, the one we've just spoken about. What's their experience going to be like with your dealership? So how do you use the tools that we've got? So currently, how quickly are my salespeople responding to an inquiry? Is that good enough? Do I have a dedicated department? Is it time to look at outsourcing some of this to qualify leads? Why don't I take up the opportunity to have a deep dive, because I may discover parts of my business that, have been in decline or decay and I haven't really paid attention to them. That's where the business consultancy part comes into it. So Ren Blanning, who runs that for us, she's one of the most well-known and best presenters that we've got, worked in the OEM space, worked at dealer level, worked in finance. And so somebody like Ren comes in and says, well, let's have a look at your business. It kind of goes back to the point that we don't just develop products. We don't, I won't mention company names, but there's companies that are product driven. They'll put out a product, they have a sales team going out and selling that product. And then you measure the success on how many of those products you sold. We measure our success on the connection we have with the industry. So the tools we build have to be good tools. If they don't work, no one's going to want to use them. And I think finally, like Redbook IQ is a bit like AutoGate, where it's the untapped resource that everyone's got, and to help understand. Now Redbook IQ we use with dealers as well, where we can give them an idea of what's happening in their area, what's happening in that market where they're competing, where we know they get KPI'd on from the OEM. It's a good time for dealers to start to push back on the OEM about some of the working conditions that they're on, and also the other way around, where the OEMs might say, well, let's try something different. We can help with all of this. We don't always have the answer, but we've got 250 odd developers that build things, and we've been able to do lots of things with customers, some really exciting projects that we've done over many years now. So, I think that Live Market, AutoGate Pro, our insights, look at our white papers, and tap in what I've been amazed with, and again, when I was on the other side, it was easy to pick holes in a business like carsales because they're all they're all too big and arrogant. Yet a majority of our staff have worked in the industry. I love that because my background is media, and people come to me and they ask me about cars, and I know very little about them. But we've got people in our business that live and breathe this, and they feel the pain of dealers. And it sometimes offends me when I hear that we're not dealer centric, because if you talk to our people, they're the ones that spend an inordinate amount of time focusing on how they can make their dealer's business better. So, yeah, the greatest product that we can offer is our people, to be honest.
Well, thanks, Ag. Really appreciate that feedback. And as far as the summary of what you guys offer at carsales.
Mark, any more questions from your side?
No more questions. I'm keen to do Ag. I'm keen to do a summary I'm keen to get your view if my summary is right from what you're saying.
Okay. Yep.
Would it be fair to say, I'm thinking of the three key things that you've just covered off here. And the first one, which confirms something from an earlier podcast of ours, where we referenced some of the initial car sales data, is that leads and activity is up. Mm-hmm. And you showed that 55% for the prestige brands, people are looking over 50 grand, that price range, there's activity, and it's up on last year, not just up month on month, up on what is a big month in the year, which is May. Huge, very positive signs. That's a really good strong green shoot. You also mentioned that the instant asset write-off may also be pushing that behavior. So if you're a small business or an SME of any size, you've got the opportunity to have that instant asset write-off. So the potential is for a deal out there, but you're going to get a massive improvement from the government. They're going to give you extra money back. So really it's a no-brainer to actually go out, and that's a huge incentive to go and spend, and the premium brands are benefiting from that, which is good to see. But overall, the rest of the market is still up. So there's a 15% view and a 20% lift in leads year on year, not month on month, year on year. So that's significant. That's across the board. But a big plus in when you mention it, there's no significant price drops. So there may be end of financial year deals, but we're not seeing distress that a lot of people are saying it's massive distress, you're going to lose a lot of money, everything's dropping. So really the sky hasn't fallen in this time, which is a really positive sign from your data. And the other point, which John, it goes back to Carl's podcast when he was talking about marketing, and the upside of isolation is that people are spending more time reviewing. So your readership and your reviews are up, therefore, and then the behavior of leads is up. And what you then summarized with what you're seeing as a good access or good use of your tools and resources is that response time to those leads. So dealers are responding and measuring how quickly they're responding, because right now it's a very unique time where people actually aren't time poor. So really, this is a time that to embrace the technology and actually be on top of it, because people will be there to have a conversation and respond. So I think there's some really powerful stuff we've covered here, Ag. Yep. And I really thank you for that.
But I think, Mark, you bring up a really good point, because the big concern is a lot of dealers are running at half staff, or they've cut their business. Some have gone into hibernation. And if everybody's out there researching, and you should have your full staff complement there to respond to those customers and be talking to them and feeding them and developing that business. So when they do actually step in to start buying, you actively engage with them. Because if the leads are up, everything's there, but if you're not running at full staff capacity, you can't deal properly with all those leads. So it's going to impact your business. Do I understand that right, eh?
I mean, I can never speak on behalf of dealers. They've made decisions based on their business. There's some are doing it really tough, so it's impossible for them to be fully staffed. But certainly, they will be receiving inquiry, and it goes back to how that's handled, and whether that means putting more people back on, which would be great, of course, for the economy, for the people that have been stood down, etc. But it's very hard to tell dealers just to do that, because there could be circumstances in their business that prevent them from doing that. But certainly the green shoots are there. The summary you gave, Mark, was right. I would just add to that it's a really important time. It's always important, but it's a really important time to put yourself in the shoes of a consumer and be one yourself. What are you thinking of right now? Now, if the default thought is, I'm thinking of a bargain, then you're probably not thinking like a consumer. Because right now, I know as a consumer, I'm not thinking of a bargain. I'm thinking of ease. I'm thinking of a good way to get something I need. Now, obviously, price comes into it. There's no question about that. Dealers have the ability to manage this, though, and they are. It looks like I said before, and you made the point, that the prices aren't dropping. We're not seeing this, this incredible destruction of price. It's the value that's been added, which is important. And I think OEMs are stepping up. Perhaps they could a little bit more. Certainly in the US, they've stepped up. There's all sorts of programs out there, which may happen here at some point, where giving a consumer the ability to defer a payment or just bring the car back if something happens. That sort of peace of mind. If you think about it, it's less about money. It's about peace of mind. But they've benefited from being able to be called an essential service. And I know that people complained about it and said, how can a car dealer be an essential service? Well, if my car breaks down and I've got, a job that has required me to keep going into work, and I have to now battle the whole situation with, a choice is public transport because my car's broken down, I want to get that fixed. So it is indeed a fairly essential service. Of course, it's not as essential as, a hospital, but it's an essential service. So I think that they've benefited from being put in that category. And so consumers aren't thinking, well, I'm waiting for you to reopen your doors because you really have to clear everything out. So I think that's helped the industry too, where even though the perception might be that some have closed, most haven't, or they've gone to skinnier numbers, but they're still there and they're still contactable. And I think that's been a really good result for dealers, so the consumers don't think they can batten them down. They can hit them hard. Yes, everyone will be looking for a deal, but that's not going to change. I'll look for a deal. I don't know about you, but everyone looks for a deal.
It's interesting at this time and it's funny how quickly we forget. 2 months ago, when panic buying was on at the supermarkets, no one cared about the price of toilet paper. It was, can I just get some? And all the specials disappeared out of the supermarkets. So they've now started to come back strategically, but still the profit numbers in all the supermarkets are exceptional. Their costs have gone up because of COVID, but the demand has, and the returns are very strong. So they're getting some good numbers. I'm really buoyed by what you've shared with us today, Ag, and thank you for those green shoots in the hard data. This isn't just an opinion. This is hard data. This is the behaviour. This is the top of the funnel, and it's our job collectively as an industry to make sure that they work their way through the funnel and are happy customers, and we keep this mobility and this industry around mobility going. So thank you very much for those insights, because there's some really powerful stuff and some great green shoots.
You're welcome. You're both welcome. It's good to join you, and it's been a bit of fun just discussing this. I think data beats opinions, right? It's a no-brainer to be able to look at any business that can provide insight to help you. And I think a lot about things, and I think we're in a situation right now where podcasts like this are a great idea, because I think we mentioned it before on air that this isn't going to be as a Tonight Show audience, but people listening and watching people in the industry, who make a living out of this. So we've got to be really careful that we give the right advice. I hope we have.
Well, you speak with data. So a very wise Frenchman once told me, and I think, John, you may have heard it as well. In God we trust, everyone else bring data. So you're the best place to get that data from right at the top of the funnel through to the sales numbers at the back end.
Yeah, Ag, thanks very much. It's been it's really eye-opening to get more understanding of the services you provide and the tools, and that there's some really great stuff there. And sometimes it's just being open to discuss these things that you can clear away, sometimes false perceptions of what you do often that. So it's fantastic. So thanks very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ag. Go those Tigers, eh?
3 and 4 years, mate.
Next Thursday night. Oh, back to back. We're going back to back.
That's what we're trying to do. Yeah, I think.
Well, statistically, Hawthorn wins a flag every 4.5 years since 1960. So it's 4.5 years since Hawthorn won a flag. So there's going to be a challenge here.
I think I can't wait for the Hawks to beat Geelong at Geelong, because there's two things that Geelong's a gift that keeps giving when you think about it. So you've got they're now playing every game at home, so they can finish on top of the ladder again. It doesn't really matter. Or they're playing at home and start losing there. Like, either way, we win as supporters, I think. It's fantastic. So I can't wait for the Hawks to beat the Cats the day after we beat the Pies.
I look forward to that as well. We used to have the best winning record down at Virginia Park when we used to play down there. So it'll be interesting if that continues.
And then we've got you the week after.
Yes. Very interesting.
Once upon a time, we will have gone together, but we might zoom it in.
It'll be. I'll text you. I'm sure you'll be texting me if the score's the other way.
Yeah, I will.
Well, thank you all for listening. Hopefully you got some value out of this show and the previous shows we put together. Please like us on YouTube, and if you share us on LinkedIn, that'd be fantastic. If you have any recommendations or suggestions or topics, please let us know. And safe travels.